Where are you from?
I'm from Korea.
India.
Bangladesh.
Thailand.
China.
Malaysia.
Cambodia.
Myanmar.
Mongolia.
The Philippines.
Taiwan.
Indonesia.
Hong Kong. Sri Lanka.
Vietnam.
Japan.
My parents worked really hard to even just move to New Zealand. They sold basically everything they had over in China just to move here. The one thing they did keep, they brought a rice cooker over just to keep their traditions and their culture. My dad worked odd end jobs here and there. He worked in takeaways, he worked fixing cars and fixing things just to make enough money. My mom lived in the rural parts of China where, yeah, she didn't have much. So she spent everything she could to move here to give us a better life.
I was like, every year you have parents interview, and I would always bring my Skux cousin because like for me back then it was like embarrassing because my dad like he didn't know how to speak English, and like I was scared I was gonna get mocked. So like I would bring my cousin who knew how to speak English to come instead of my dad, because every time my dad came he would be just talking Khmer all the time, and I would have to like translate to him, and he would be just like growling me in front of everyone in our language, so it was like embarrassing. But it's like now it's all good bringing my dad because a lot of people know him and he's like well respected, and like I grew up to like respect him.
We live with my mom's partner, my grandma, my younger sister. So apart from speaking to my mom's partner, it's essentially all just Thai, because it's harder for the older generation to be able to develop and learn a new language. So like I just want her to be able to live comfortably knowing that it's not essential for her to know every single word. And I think it's real important to like continue on this language, because I don't know if we're going to be living in New Zealand forever, but I just want, I want my whole family, my extended family, to know how to speak Thai. I remember in primary school.
I know my mom, when she was living in Sri Lanka, she had to study through the civil war that was going on. She was in college and she would have to study in a room, and then all of a sudden alarms would go off and she would have to run downstairs into a bomb shelter. And she would tell me how she would need to study with a small little light, and while there was bombs being dropped from the sky, and it would humble me and like open my eyes to how privileged we are. And she would tell me how the Tamil Tigers, which are one side of the Civil War, would raid their house and tell them to get out and use their house as like as a stay for the night, I guess. And then they would just trash it and then eat their food, eat all their hard work, and then they would just leave. My dad, he also faced a huge amount of hard times, especially when his mom was sick in Sri Lanka. He just graduated, and he would send literally 99% of his paycheck to his mom and his brother living in Sri Lanka just to take care of them, which meant he had to live off literally nothing.
I'm not proud of that I was actually embarrassed by my parents because they couldn't really speak English that well, because obviously they grew up in Bangladesh, so that's not really like primary language and like the first language.
In terms of language, I feel like it definitely, like living in New Zealand definitely has made me lose my roots a little bit, because when I first started school, I knew literally no English, so I was just fluent in Tamil, which is my mother tongue. And when I got to school, I had to go through ESOL, and teachers here, they kind of made me unlearn Tamil and learn English. And I guess at that point, I just went with it to not fail school. But then, yeah, now I can hardly speak Tamil, and I'm like decent at English, but yeah, definitely made me lose that connection a little bit. So whenever I go back to India to, meet relatives, I can hardly communicate with them. And they wonder what happened, but that's what it is.
I feel very grateful that my parents made the decision to immigrate to New Zealand, and I'm grateful that I was born here as well, as it made things a little bit easier fitting in.
My parents came over quite a while ago. Yeah, so they came over with not much. And I know that they came from like a pretty rough place. And it was for me and my brother, because they wanted like a better place for us to grow up, because in Singapore, they didn't really like the way they sort of kids were brought up. They preferred like a Western society, but I guess like that kind of made us more like distanced from our culture.
So my mom came from Burma, from Myanmar. My dad came from Malaysia, and they both met in Perth as international students. You know, with the whole Asian stereotype is that they go into something quite scientific. My parents ended up both going into quite creative fields. And at that time, it was very, like, weird for Asians to become creatives. But I think it was nice knowing that my parents were able to use that sort of cultural background as well as, like, the Western culture to be successful in their own field. And now they've got, like, their own business and it's, like, successful. So it's really nice to have that sort of going for me. So, like, my parents have tried to maintain some of that while we're here in New Zealand, but I wouldn't imagine it's exactly the same. You know, it's being surrounded by your family and being in that sort of environment with other Mongolian people.
My dad and my uncle, they fled Vietnam. They obviously had to go find new life. Like, if you wanted to live, then it's either you leave everything and go, or you stay back and risk. The thing that really touched me the most was, I have a cousin. He's disabled. He uses a wheelchair, but because when he was in Vietnam, they had to leave behind, so my dad carried my cousin on his back the whole way. So from Vietnam all the way to the Philippines, all the way to New Zealand. So to me, that was, when my dad told me that, it was quite, I was proud of my dad.
So my dad, he took food science in university, and that landed him a job in Fonterra in Japan. And then that eventually led to a promotion, which was a job here. Yep, so we migrated into New Zealand, and we've been living here ever since. But in 2012, my dad left back for Japan to take care of his mom.
So my mum, she met my dad when he was working overseas on a boat in Jakarta, Indonesia. And she met him there, and next thing you know, they're like in a relationship, they're happy. And my dad obviously had to move back to New Zealand, so they continued their relationship long distance, and it wasn't until he proposed that she made the move here. She told me this one story, like, she was at work and she was just like bullied most of the time by the people because, like, you know, she couldn't really like speak English, and it took her time to like get used to things. So yeah, I think she did face a lot of prejudice.
My parents' migration here was quite a hard journey for them. When they moved over, they barely knew anyone, had anyone, and was just being in a society full of people that they are unfamiliar with. That whole journey and experience made them stronger, and I guess it inspired me to kind of achieve the same thing they have.
So they left behind everything when they came to New Zealand. You know, they knew nobody here. There was no relatives. You know, they came here really poor, nothing but their luggage. You know, my mum was a housewife in Malaysia, and she suddenly found herself having to work full time, as well as juggling 3 young children, because I came to New Zealand when I was 2 or 3 years old, and I know she would work like really long hours trying to make this business work, which was a printing business at the time. So she'd work early in the morning, and then when school ended, she'd have to come pick us up, take us to a shop, and then we'd have to stay until late night. One of the stories that my mom told me when she first came here was they had these computer lessons, like they would pay you to learn how to use computers, and you know, she would be so tired after working all day, but because we were so poor at the time, she would have to force herself, you know, to sit at these lessons for like 2 hours at a time just to, you know, get maybe $100. It's really exhausting, especially when she had to look after all these children by herself, because my dad would have to take night shifts as a security guard as well as studying, because he was a lawyer in Malaysia, but when he came here, obviously laws are different. He had to learn New Zealand laws. He had to learn the Maori laws, and so that was a really big change for them.
My dad, he's like, what do you call it? He came out of the war, basically. So his parents were killed in the war, and my mom, she met my dad when she was 18. She got married like then, because it was like arranged marriage back then. But my dad's family, they somehow made it to New Zealand, and they were able to sponsor him to come to New Zealand when I was about 2 years old. So I came here when I was 2 years old, and ever since my parents have been working at a bakery, starting from 4 and finishing at 5 for 7 days. Yeah. So like I'm grateful for like everything they've done for me, because that's hard work, working like what, 13 hours each day, every day, just to provide for your kids. But now we have our own shop. What do you call it? I'm kind of repaying it back or helping them, because they get me in there unpaid labor from 4 to 5 every day too. So yeah.
I feel like my parents and my grandparents especially, they're like, super cultural, and they do a lot of stuff, like, a lot of Indian things, I guess you could say, and I really don't. And I feel like I could be a lot closer to them if I did continue to do those things. I kind of stopped, I don't know, around intermediate, but yeah, so I guess it's a regret of mine for sure, but I'm working towards rebuilding that connection with my culture, I guess.
Hi, thanks for watching the 5th and final section of What Does Being Asian Mean to You? From the very beginning, I had just wanted to create something that I was proud of, which also conveyed a message that happened to be lost within the manifestation of society. So I really hope that you enjoyed watching this and that you took something from everyone's stories. As this is the end, I really hope that I have your support through future projects, whatever they may be, and that I continue to actually do them, because I'm very busy and this is a lot of work, but very worth it, and I hope you found it worth watching as well. I hope you take something from every single person who has sat in front of this camera and been vulnerable, as it's very brave to do so in a society where it's looked down upon. I don't have much else to say, but thank you, and please, 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 always be proud to be Asian.